Hey, welcome back to the videos. I thought a good topic to cover for the next few weeks would be playing in 3/4 time in Scruggs style. I actually received some emails from a few people over the past month or so, and more than one person asked me to do some videos on 3/4 time in Scruggs style because it is one of the timing signatures, one of the timing pulses that you'll play in as a bluegrass player. We have common time with 4 beats per measure, cut time with 2 beats per measure that you hear in a lot of instrumentals, and then occasionally you'll have waltz time, which is 3 beats per measure. Waltz time is not nearly as prevalent as the other two, but you will encounter songs that are 3/4 time. And if you go back and listen to some classic bluegrass from the 50s, 60s, 70s, even to today, there will be 3/4 time songs mixed in with the other timing signatures that you'll encounter. So let's look at that. That's a really good topic, and one that I thought maybe I have covered before, but after looking through the Lick of the Week archives, I have not covered this at all. So I don't know why, but I missed that topic, which is a shame because it's a good one. But the first thing we need to look at is identifying the difference in the pulse or the feel of 3/4 time versus the other two timing signatures. I'm going to fire up my just standard metronome, my old wind-up here, and we'll use it to count. Here it would be common time with 4 beats per measure, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, which has a characteristic strong, weak kind of pulse. Then we have, for instrumental music, we have cut time, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and, which has a kind of characteristic weak, strong kind of thing. And now we have common time, and I can use the metronome to help me count it, even though the metronome is just swinging back and forth. 3 beats per measure, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So I can use the wind-up metronome for that, but the downside to a wind-up metronome is it doesn't help me identify the weak, strong pulses in a timing signature unless I say it with my voice or feel it inside. I don't have any representation on that machine. It just gives me the same thing over and over. So characteristics of 3/4 time in bluegrass, especially in Scruggs style, is that you're going to emphasize the first beat of each measure, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and, because this was based on dance music. That's why it's called waltz time, and I think the first beat being stronger was like an indicator for the dancers to change movements or do some kind of different dance step. And that has migrated into just songs in general. Even if it's like a ballad or an instrumental in 3/4 time, you still keep that strong, weak, weak, strong, weak, weak, 1 and 2 and 3 and kind of feel. Now, as 3-finger banjo players, we'd obviously, the first thing would leap to mind is I want to be able to roll over 3/4 time. Well, that's not as hard a proposition as you would think, but I think it's a good idea to really focus on what that beat feels like, strong, weak, weak first, and then build up. So let's do something simple. I'm going to use my digital metronome for this because it will distinguish different beats for me as far as how strong they are. I'm using a kick drum, and I think I have 2 snare drums here, so that we'll hear the first beat being the kick drum, that deep kind of pulse, followed by the 2 snares. So the kick drum will be beat number 1, 1 and then the 2 snares will be the 2 other ones. So we have 3/4 notes representing the beat structure of each measure. Now I'm going to do something simple before I do any rolls. This is the exercises I give my students. I'm going to play the 3rd string as a quarter note, and then 2 pinches. So I'll have 1 and 2 and 3 and then switch to the 4th string, 1 and 2 and 3 and then go back and forth between the 3rd and 4th string. Let's do that with a metronome. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, now that will give you a rhythmic feel, a sensibility about how to count. And the reason I'm using 3 and 4 alternating back and forth is I want the first beat to be represented by 1 note, so I can play a little harder. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and too hard, but I'm trying to exaggerate those notes. Okay, now the next step up for that in my mind would be to incorporate a few notes from a roll in with that pattern. I don't want to go full speed roll yet because I want to get a feel of how this happens. So I'm trying to give you some exercises to graduate you up. What if I were to mix just a couple of 8 notes, like from an 8-note roll? A pattern I like to give my students, and we'll see if it works for you here, is actually play 3-2 as 8 notes, and then the 5th as a quarter note, and then a pinch of 1 and 5 as a quarter note, and then 4 and 2 as 8th notes, because 2 8th notes is the same time value as 1 quarter note. So we have the first beat being this, and then the second beat, third beat, and then 4th string, 2nd string, 5th string, 5th and the 1st. So 3-2-5 pinch, 4-2-5 pinch will be our next pattern, which mixes just a couple of 8th notes in with quarter notes. Let's try that. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. 1. 1. So that starts to sound a little bit like gallop, kind of a roll beginning to develop. But it keeps that pulse 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, which we need for the typical approach for bluegrass banjo in this time signature. Okay, now another exercise would be, could I go from that into a full-fledged roll? Okay, now think about common time where you might play 8-note roll, or cut time, or any of the other two where you play 8th or 16th notes. If you're going to try to play a full-fledged roll, continual roll over 3 beats, it's not as hard as you think. Since we have 3 beats in that measure, if we use the 8th note approach, which is 1 note on the down beat, 1 note on the up, 1 on the down, 1 on the up, 1 on the down, 1 on the up, 1 and 2 and 3, and we'll have note, 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 which is 6 8th notes. So if you think about it, playing a 3-note roll over 3 beats, typically in this time signature, just means you're playing 6 8th notes. So let's try that. The roll I'm going to do is maybe 3, 2, 1, 5, 1, 2. Let's try a reverse roll. And we'll play that with the metronome. Here we go. So the 3rd string each time is becoming the first beat of each new measure. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. I could even mix the 4th string in with that exercise to come up with a little more variety. Let's try adding the 4. Here we go. That you could roll, and of course this is just one example of a roll. You can use any roll. What about a forward roll? Let's try 5-2-1, 5-2-1 as our 6-note repeating roll pattern. Ready? The 5th string becomes the first strong beat of each measure. Try this with backwards rolls. The alternating thumb roll is the one oddball standard pattern that you're familiar with that won't work very well when you try to take alternating thumb pattern, which is based on eighth notes, 8 notes in that pattern, that doesn't transcribe very well to missing one beat. So if you try to do an alternating thumb roll over 3/4 time, you'll find that it won't work. Now it's possible you can modify it, but it's not a roll pattern that you can complete. You can't go 3-2-5-1, 4-2-5-1 and have it fall rhythmically where it should, strong, weak kind of pattern for 3/4 time. So any of the other roll patterns will work, because you got to remember, no matter what the timing signature is, the note values that you learn in music always stay the same. Quarter notes are quarter notes, dotted notes are always dotted, 16ths and 8ths are the same, 32nds, rests have the same value. So nothing about the structure of the notes themselves is going to change. It's how many of those notes you can fit into the 3-beat pattern and make them feel like they work and keep that strong, weak pulse is what it's all about. And now we can take these exercises and even go farther if you wanted to switch from rolls back into some of the other pinching patterns. Let me see if I can bring the metronome up again. Let's try something like 3-2-1-5-1-2, and then maybe go into our pinching patterns. What's happening there is you start to get the characteristic sound of Scruggs style in 3/4 time. Because if you notice, Earl or Sonny or any of those great players from that first generation, from that time period, when they play in 3/4 time, they don't typically roll through an entire song just. I mean, it's possible you can do it. Mathematically it works, and there's no rule that says you can't do that, but you don't really capture that strong first beat of each measure every time. So if you notice, players like Earl will, and of course he'll do things with the left hand, which we'll do in subsequent videos. But the main thing here in this video is to get you to feel that strong, weak pulse and be able to switch between a roll pattern and playing quarter notes. So that'll wrap up this video. Next time we get together, we'll look at adding some ornaments with the left hand, maybe adding some chords. But nothing rhythmically about the structure of this meter is going to change. We just need to incorporate both hands together, and maybe we'll look at taking some classic Scruggs licks and modifying them slightly from 4/4 to work in 3/4, or some ideas that Earl just developed just for 3/4 time. But have fun with this, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.